Let me describe two people to you, same city, same age, late 20s, both pulling in right around $74,000 a year, which is basically the national median. On paper, identical. Person one is in a dealership parking lot on a Tuesday evening, signing paperwork on a truck he didn't plan to buy. The salesman kept saying, "That's less than your daily coffee habit," which isn't true, but by hour 3 of the process, he'd stopped doing the math. $767 a month. 6 years, he has $340 in savings. His credit card is at $6,400 and climbing. He's not irresponsible. He's just doing exactly what the average American does. Person 2 is at her kitchen table on a Wednesday morning. Laptop open, coffee hot, no alarm set. She took the day off because she could, not because she's rich. She's not. She has 4 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account, a Roth IRA she contributes to automatically, and a car she's owned outright for 2 years. She doesn't look wealthy, she doesn't post about it, but she sleeps 8 hours a night without running mental math at 2 a.m. Same income, completely different financial reality. The difference between those two people isn't luck, it's 15 signs, 15 specific behaviors that separate the stable from the struggling, and most people don't even know which side of the line they're on. My name is Nick, and I probably spend too much time staring at financial data that should make everyone uncomfortable. If you've ever looked at your bank account and wondered whether you're actually doing okay or just convincingly pretending to be, subscribe and hit the like button, and because today we're going to find out. Let's get into it. Before we dive in, I need to establish something uncomfortable. We've been conditioned to think average means fine, stable, normal, it doesn't. Average means 68% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. It means the majority of adults couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency without going into debt. The average American financial position is far more precarious than most people realize, and that means the bar for doing better is lower than you'd think. Let's find out if you clear it. Sign 1. You have an emergency fund that covers 3 months of expenses. Let's start with the most basic measure of financial resilience, and it's where most Americans fail immediately. According to Bankrate's 2025 Emergency Savings Report, only 46% of U.S. adults have enough saved to cover 3 months of expenses. A full 24% have zero emergency savings. Not a little. Zero. And Bankrate's 2026 data found that 59% of Americans couldn't handle a $1,000 surprise expense without borrowing money or going into debt. $1,000. That's not a financial emergency. That's a mildly inconvenient Tuesday. And 6 in 10 Americans can't cover it without going into debt. Here's what not having an emergency fund actually feels like. It's a low hum of anxiety that never fully goes away. It's the reason people check their bank balance before they go grocery shopping. It's the reason a $600 car repair doesn't feel like an inconvenience. It feels like a threat. And here's how most people figure it out when the hit comes. 25% put it on a credit card and pay it off over time, which means a one-time problem just became a multi-month debt at 22% interest. Like an emergency doesn't just hurt once without savings, it keeps hurting. If you have even 2 or 3 months of expenses sitting in an account right now, you're in the top half of this country by this metric alone. Sign 2, you're contributing to a retirement account at any level. This one sounds like a low bar. It isn't. About 36% of non-retired Americans have no retirement account whatsoever. Vanguard's How America Saves report shows the median 401k balance across all age groups is $38,176. For workers under 35, the median balance is now $17,200. That's the midpoint, meaning half the people under 35 have less than that saved for a retirement that could last 30 years. Current withdrawal rates, that's about 8 months of rent. Congratulations on your 8 months. Here's the math. Invest $200 a month starting at 25 at a 7% average return, and you'll have around $525,000 by 65. Start at 35 with the same amount, and you end up with $243,000. Same effort, less than half the result. That gap, created by a single decade of delay, is $282,000. And one more thing, About 25% of workers with a 401k don't contribute enough to capture their employer's full match. 1 in 4 people leaving free money on the table every single paycheck. Not complicated money, not risky money, free money. Sign 3. You pay your credit card in full every month. U.S. credit card debt hit a record $1.277 trillion in late 2025. Trillion with a T. 47% of all cardholders carry a revolving balance. The average balance is $7,886 at 22.3% interest. Do the math. Pay the minimum. That $7,886 cost you over $10,000 in interest. Takes more than 20 years to clear. At 22.3%, you're not managing debt. You're subscribed to it. Let me introduce you to Caleb. He's 28, pays his minimums every month, considers himself financially responsible. He owes $6,400. His minimum payment is $128. He's never missed one. What Caleb doesn't realize is that at 22% interest, he'll pay over $9,000 in interest alone before that balance hits zero. And that assumes he never uses the card again, which he will because it's still in his wallet, and that 20% off coupon for a pizza he doesn't need is calling his name. By the time he's done, he'll have paid nearly $15,000 for $6,400 worth of stuff. He's essentially paying an ignorance tax of $8,600. He's not irresponsible. He just never ran the actual math. If you pay your card in full every month, you're using a system designed to trap people and walking out unscathed. Sign 4. You actually invest in the stock market consistently. 38% of American adults own no stock whatsoever. Not through a retirement account, not through an index fund, not through anything. 4 in 10 people have zero exposure to the greatest wealth-building engine of the last 100 years. If the market were a buffet, 38% of Americans would be sitting in the parking lot, eating a granola bar, wondering why they're still hungry. The wealthiest 10% of Americans own 87% of all stock, roughly $44 trillion. The bottom 50% own about 1% of it. The engine is running, the seats just aren't evenly distributed. Less than 1 in 4 actively managed funds beat their passive benchmark over a 10-year period. You can hire a professional, pay higher fees, get confident-sounding phone calls, and statistically lose to the boring index fund that just sits there tracking the market. Consistent, automatic, boring investing is one of the most powerful things you can do. And it's what most Americans have either never started or completely overthought. Sign 5. You save more than 10% of your income. The U.S. personal savings rate hit 4.5% in early 2026. The historical average is 8.4%. Financial experts recommend 15 to 20%. We're currently saving at 4.5%. That's not even close. That's bringing a plastic fork to a knife fight. The median household earns $83,730 a year. At the current savings rate, they're putting away $3,768 annually. A household saving 15% sets aside $12,560, more than 3 times as much. Same paycheck, completely different trajectory. Invest that extra $8,800 a year at 7% for 30 years, and you're looking at roughly $890,000 in additional wealth built on the exact same income. That's not luck. That's a percentage point difference sustained over time. 5 down. Here's something worth sitting with. Every single one of these signs is something most people assume they're doing okay at. The 68% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck don't think of themselves as financially struggling. They think of themselves as normal. That's the entire problem. Not the behavior, but the belief that the behavior is fine. The next 10 signs are where the gap between what people think is true about their finances and what's actually true gets genuinely uncomfortable. Stay with me. Sign 6, your net worth is positive. This sounds like the absolute floor of financial health, and yet about 8% of US households have a negative net worth. Credit Karma surveys put the self-reported figure at 31%. Among Gen Z adults, 41% report zero or negative net worth. The Federal Reserve shows the median household net worth is $192,900 overall. But for households under 35, it drops to $39,000. Total US household debt hit a record $18.8 trillion at the end of 2025. Negative net worth has a texture. It's the thing that makes you hesitate before you open your bank app. It's the math you do at 11 p.m., where no matter how many times you run the numbers, they don't get better. Just being in the black, more assets than liabilities, is an achievement a meaningful portion of the population hasn't reached. If your number is positive and growing, you're already ahead of where a lot of people are standing. Sign 7, you own your car. Outright or keep payments reasonable. The average monthly payment on a new car reached $767 in Q4 2025, not for a luxury vehicle. The average payment for a regular car purchased by a regular person. 1 in 5 new car loans now carries a payment exceeding $1,000 a month. In 2019, that figure was 4.3%. So in 6 years, we went from rare to 1 in 5 Americans. The average new car loan is nearly 69 months, almost 6 years. 20% extend to 84 months or longer. 7 years of payments on an asset that loses value every single day you drive it. That's not financing a purchase. That's renting the feeling of having arrived, with a 7-year commitment and no exit ramp. Edmunds found that 29.3% of trade-ins in late 2025 carried negative equity. The average amount underwater was $7,214, an all-time record. So they didn't just buy a new car, they paid $7,214 for a car they no longer have, then started fresh payments on the next one. Wealth destruction with heated seats and a backup camera. If you own your car outright, roughly 36% of car owners do. Every month, someone else hands $767 to a lender for something losing value. You hand that to your future. Sign 8, you actually track your spending. 86% of Americans say they have a budget. About 51% demonstrate it with their actual behavior. That 35-point gap is doing a lot of work. The average American spends $219 a month on subscriptions when every charge is itemized. Self-estimates average $86. That gap, the $133 they didn't know existed, it's the ghost of every free trial they forgot to cancel. Like that premium meditation app they haven't opened since they realized it just plays sounds of rain and costs $15 a month. Congratulations. You just funded someone else's quarterly earnings with money you didn't know you were spending. And beyond subscriptions, 48% of social media users have bought something impulsively after seeing it online. Half the people scrolling Instagram or TikTok have sent money to a brand because an algorithm figured out exactly what moment to show them exactly the right product. If you know what you spend every month, actually no, not I think it's around, you have a level of financial self-awareness that most Americans genuinely don't have. Sign 9, your credit score is above 750. The average US FICO score dropped to 714 in 2025, the first decline in over a decade. About 48% of Americans sit at 750 or higher. Only 24.4% have cracked 800. Here's why it matters beyond bragging rights. 2 people walk into the same bank for the same mortgage. One has a 680, one has a 760. The second person pays tens of thousands of dollars less in interest over 30 years. Like a good credit score is a permanent compounding discount on borrowed money. And the behavior that builds it, not paying on time, keeping balances low, is the same behavior that shows up on every other sign on this list. That was 9. If you've checked 6 or 7 of these, you're not just doing okay, you're building something the majority of people haven't. But these last 5, these are the real differentiators. Let's keep going. Sign 10, you actually understand basic financial concepts. Only 27% of Americans could correctly answer 5 or more out of 7 basic financial knowledge questions in the FINRA Foundation's 2024 study. The TIAA Institute scored Americans at just 48% correct across 28 financial concepts. 48%. That's not passing, that's barely showing up. The consequences aren't abstract, they're arithmetic. People who don't understand compound interest pay for it in credit card charges that accumulate for years. People who don't understand tax-advantaged accounts leave retirement money in taxable accounts when they don't have to. Financial ignorance has a price tag. It just doesn't show up on a single bill. If you understand how a Roth IRA differs from a traditional 401k, how compound interest works, why an index fund tends to outperform most active strategies, you're in the top quarter of financial literacy in this country. The people in that quarter make measurably different decisions because they can see the math underneath the choices. Sign 11, you have life insurance and disability coverage. Only 51% of Americans own any life insurance. 75 million people have no coverage whatsoever. And 72% of people significantly overestimate what a basic term life policy costs, meaning millions are going without coverage based on a misconception about the price. They didn't make an informed decision. They assumed they couldn't afford it and never checked. Disability insurance is even more neglected. Just 18% of US adults have it, despite the fact that 1 in 4 20-year-olds will experience a long-term disability before age 67. If you became unable to work for 6 months, not permanently, just 6 months, nearly half of US households would face financial hardship. Not inconvenience, hardship. If you have both, you've protected against the catastrophic tail risk that everyone assumes won't happen to them. Until it does, sign 12. You don't skip medical care because of cost. A KFF health tracking poll from 2025 found that 36% of American adults had skipped or delayed needed health care in the prior year because they couldn't afford it, including 37% of insured adults. People paying premiums every month, still avoiding care because of cost. 72 million Americans went without needed health care in a single 3-month period. Skipping the $200 checkup to save money and then paying $4,000 in the ER 3 months later is the financial equivalent of not changing your oil and then buying a new engine. Technically a choice, not a great one. If you can go to the doctor when you need to and absorb a medical bill without going into debt, that's a level of financial stability that more than a third of Americans, including many with insurance, cannot currently claim. Sign 13, you have more than one source of income. Between 27% and 38% of Americans have some form of secondary income. But here's the number that matters. LendingTree found that 61% of side hustlers say their life would be financially unaffordable without that extra income. The majority of people with second income aren't building on top of a foundation. They need it just to maintain the floor. Does a second income stream that's additive, one that accelerates your position rather than sustains your baseline, is a fundamentally different thing. Rental income, it's dividends, freelance work that funds investments rather than rent. Research on self-made millionaires consistently shows that 65% had at least 3 income streams. If you've built something that generates money beyond your primary paycheck and you don't need it just to survive the month, you've moved from financial fragility into financial optionality. Sign 14. You've resisted lifestyle creep as your income grew. This is the sneaky one because it doesn't feel like a trap when you're in it. Every upgrade feels earned. Every expense feels justified. Goldman Sachs' 2025 retirement survey found that 41% of workers earning between $300,000 and $500,000 a year live paycheck to paycheck at $400,000 a year. That is a remarkable achievement in the wrong direction. Goldman attributed this directly to lifestyle creep, the phenomenon where luxuries quietly become necessities. The lease upgrade becomes a necessity. The private school becomes a necessity. Suddenly, that $280 dinner on a Tuesday feels normal, which is wild because for $280, that steak should be able to do your taxes for you. And 78% of Americans report making purchases they immediately regret. Not occasionally, 78%. Most people, most of the time, are spending money they didn't plan to spend on things they don't actually want, and they know it within minutes. If your spending hasn't risen in lockstep with every raise you've gotten, if you've directed income increases into savings and investments rather than a bigger apartment or a newer car, you've avoided a trap that swallows people at every income level. Sign 15. You're not living paycheck to paycheck. We saved the biggest one for last. 68% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck as of August 2025. More than half of American workers need their next paycheck to cover current expenses, not savings, not investments, just keeping the lights on and the rent paid. And the counterintuitive version of this statistic is the one I want you to actually hear. 50% of earners making $100,000 or more live paycheck to paycheck. Goldman Sachs found 41% of $300,000 to $500,000 earners describe themselves the same way. High income does not automatically create financial stability. In a lot of cases, it just creates higher cost obligations that demand high income indefinitely. The treadmill speeds up. You don't get off. Living paycheck to paycheck doesn't just mean you're tight on money. It means you cannot make a single independent decision. You can't take a risk on a job you'd actually like. You can't leave a bad situation. You can't absorb a hit without everything wobbling. Every paycheck is a permission slip to keep existing at the same level. That's not freedom. That's just a more comfortable version of the same constraint. The Federal Reserve found that 69% of Americans would be worried about covering living expenses if they lost their primary income source. If you're in the 31% who wouldn't be because you have savings, margin, and investments that could carry you, you've built something that 2/3 of the country is still working toward. Here's what all 15 of these signs have in common. None of them require a specific income. Not one. They require behavior, sustained, consistent, often boring behavior that most people either haven't started or have been meaning to get to. The gap between the financially average person and the financially healthy person is not primarily an income gap. It's a behavior gap that compounds silently over years, and a person saving 15% of $60,000 is in a better long-term position than a person saving 2% of $100,000. A person with a paid-off $15,000 car and a funded emergency account is more financially resilient than someone with a $65,000 leased SUV and $400 in savings. Those numbers sound backwards. The math is not. The average in America isn't a destination, it's a current. And in 2026, that current is pulling most people toward a cliff. The question isn't whether you're doing okay today. It's whether you're building towards something on purpose, and currents are easy to drift in without noticing until you look up and realize how far you've gone without meaning to. The question isn't whether you're doing okay, it's whether you're building towards something on purpose or just keeping up with everyone who isn't. If this video gave you something to think about, subscribe and drop a like. It genuinely helps. I'll see you in the next one.